Okay, guys, so hello guys. Hello guys. So today we are coming live on simulating the forecasting metrics on the data, and so we know that how important is a forecast, and forecast is something like it actually creates a demand plan. So if you want to create a demand plan, the first step is to create the forecast. So how important is the forecast for a company is that they want to get the preparedness in advance so that they can actually serve their customers in advance, and this preparedness will help the companies to make a good amount of revenue. And because the supply chain, the time to acquire the products and time to make the products and time to acquire the raw materials, right? This all matters in supply chain. So if you want to actually make a product and give to the customer, you have to plan the entire supply chain. The planning starts with the raw material or sourcing, right? Sourcing and procurement, so sourcing and purchasing. So when you combine sourcing and purchasing, we actually arrive at the procurement. Then we come to the inventory plan. The inventory plan includes for the raw material as well as finished goods as well as semi-finished materials. Right. So here we need to understand how we are managing the inventory. Okay. So this the supply plan and the inventory plan, right? The supply plan, inventory plan, and production plan can be simplified. Can get simplified if we make the right forecast. So the entire the objective of making the forecast is just not making the forecast, but it also helps in simplifying the supply chain. So today we will see some of the forecasting metrics which we have to work on so that we improve the forecasting, right? So if you look at, I have a simple matrix here, and this matrix explains about the forecasting error. This is, if you look at this one is called high error, and this is mild error, mild forecasting error. And this data is coming. This table is being derived. This table is being derived from this forecast. So here we have our product. Here we have our data. This is the sales from here. This sales which I have is for 25 months, right? From if you look at August 2020 onwards till August 2022, and this is the data which we have for last 25 months. And I'm calculating the frequency percentage. So how many in this last 25 months, how many months we have a sales and how many months we do not have a sales, right? That is what we are trying to calculate over here. Then, so the reason this is a very important metric which we need to calculate, because if we have high frequency percentage, then I think we can actually it's better to forecast such item. If you do not have this high frequency item, it's not a good idea to do the forecast. So if I have a high percentage of demand for last 25 months, then I'm going to use the MTS strategy, right? Make to stock strategy. If it's not, then I have to think something else. Similarly, there is a skewness, right? This is a skewness. This skewness is going to tell us how data is distributed. The data is distributed normally or not distributed normally, right? This is what going to help us. If the data is distributed normally, then our forecasting exercise becomes very simple, because the most of the data is concentrated around the mean, or there is equal distribution of data on the left side of the mean, on the right side of the mean, right? So we have a very data which is uniformly which is normally distributed. So that's why we actually, if we have a low skewness, then our forecasting objective or forecasting process becomes simpler. So here we have, if you look at this is 0.60 minus 0.60 skewness, and we say this is medium skewness, right? If you look at this is minus 0.09, we say no skewness. So we have a matrix. We have actually defined what is a range for which we need to define data is highly skewed or not skewed, that we have already defined in this formula here. So it's a very important metric, skewness. If you have to check your data is normally distributed or it is not normally distributed, it's a very important thing we need to check. Seems like my screen is stuck, so let me. Data is highly skewed or not skewed, but we have already defined this formula here. So it's very important metric, if you have to check it. Okay, so this is a very important metric, and we have defined what is skewness, what is medium skewness, what is no skewness, what is high skewness. So this is a range is there, and I don't want to discuss about this range. So what is important here is to understand what is the impact of skewness on the forecast. The impact of skewness in the forecast is that if we have high skewness, then we have more challenges in getting highly accurate forecast. Means we have to understand the reason of skewness, why the data is having high skewness. We have to understand those reasons. Based upon those reasons, we have to come up with the solutions to get the right forecast or the right accurate forecast. So it is very clearly but when we look at this skewness value, by looking at the skewness value, if it is very high, it means that our forecasting challenges are going to increase to get the right accuracy. That is what we have to understand from the skewness, right? So there is this very simple formula, a straightforward formula in Excel, that is called SKEW, which we need to use to calculate the skewness. Okay.
So I would like to bring one more aspect is that is called the variability here, and this I am going to define by using a formula called COB. So first I am going to calculate the standard deviation dot sample. I'll divide it by average of the same data range. Right? So this gives me a variability, and this variability is very important to understand. It's very important to calculate to understand how much is the variability. If the variability goes high, the predictability comes down. It means the accuracy of the forecast, to get the accuracy of the forecast becomes a challenge. For that, we need to understand what is the level of variability and why that variability is coming into inside in the data. So if you look at here, this 50% is a variability. It's good enough. I think we can go with the 50%. But if you look at here, 177%, 184%, this is a very high level of variability. And this, if you look at 234%, is a very high level of variability. If this level of high variability we get inside the data, it means we have to think, we have to put some extra effort to understand the variability of the forecast, and then accordingly we need to bring in the picture, bring the picture or means the solutions to actually reduce those variability, right? Now what we'll see, the another metric is whether the data has a trend or do not have a trend. So for that, what I'm using is I'm using a formula called CORREL, 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 and this is going to tell me whether the data has a correlation or not having a correlation with the time period or not having a correlation with time period. If it is having a correlation with time period, it means it is having a trend, right? So I'll give a benchmark here. If it is more than 0.3, then I will define this is having a trend, and if it is less than having 0.3, I will not define this as having a trend. So this is what we are. Now we are, after calculating the correlation between time period and the sales, historical sales. Now again we are defining with the benchmark, and if this trend value is more than, if this absolute value of this trend value is more than 0.3, the meaning of absolute value is that we are converting this negative value into also the positive value, and we are going to compare this positive value with this positive value. So if this positive value, that is right now it is minus 0.033, so I will not take this minus 0.033, I will take this as an absolute value of minus 0.033, and I will say this is plus 0.033. Then I will compare this plus 0.033 with this 0.3. If this value is more than the benchmark value 0.3, then I will say this is having a trend, right? Or I will say this is not having a trend. That's what actually there. Similarly, I am using a formula called forecast or TTS or seasonality to calculate the seasonality aspect. So how much seasonality we have in this data, right? How much seasonality we have in this data, we are going to understand. Is seasonality of 2 months or 3 months or 4 months or 6 months? Right? What is the seasonality we have here? So we will also compute a seasonality. So what we are doing here is that we are not predicting this data. We are not using any kind of naive methods like moving average or average, the kind of forecasting formulas we are not applying here directly, because we first need to understand whether there is a pattern present in the data. Right? It's a very simple thing. So again, in the trend aspect also we have to understand whether we have a multiplicative trend or we have a additive trend. Right? Those things also we need to understand. So as of now, we have a seasonality, whether we have a additive seasonality or a multiplicative seasonality. Those things we need to also have to understand. So these are some of the forecasting metrics which we need to simulate. So right now I can simulate. Suppose if I want to, if you look at here, I have defined a formula. Whether this value is more than 0.3, then define it as trend, and if this value is more than 0, then define it as seasonality. But in this case, these two values are less than 0.3 and this is equal to 0. In this case, we say there is no trend and no seasonality. If you say NT is called no trend and NS is called no seasonality, right? So like this, we are detecting how many, which data has trend, which data has seasonality. We have to detect that. If you look at most of the data, I think there is some filters might have been applied, so I will remove the filters. Okay. So after remove the filters, now you will see over here, this is less than 0.3. This is less than 0.3, but this is more than 0. So there is seasonality in the data. So what we are saying that there is only seasonal pattern exists, right? There is no trend pattern exists over here. There is only seasonal pattern exists over here. Similarly, if you look at the first one, there is a seasonality is 0 and the trend is less than the correlation value is less than 0.3. So since the correlation value is less than 0.3 and seasonality is equal to 0, we say there is no trend and no seasonality present in this data. If you look at this next value, this is more than 0.3, right? This is more, absolute value of this is more than 0.3. So we say this correlation value is more than 0.3 and there is seasonality is also present which is more than 0. Hence we say there is a trend as well as seasonality is present in the data. And now if you look at this data which are also having the variability, let me also calculate the variability. The variability is 154%, right? So even though this, and the reason why we have this 154% as the variability, because there is seasonality as well as trend is present in this data. That's the reason why we have this high variability. So if we use a forecasting method which takes into account trend and seasonality, this variability factor can be taken care of. So this variability factor will not affect the forecast accuracy. This variability factor will not affect the forecast accuracy because this variability factor is coming because of the presence of the trend and seasonality. If the presence of trend and seasonality is creating the variability, and if we use a forecasting method which takes into account the trend and seasonality, right, then I think we will not have any kind of challenge in actually, we will eliminate the challenge of this variability. Okay. Now similarly, if you look at here, even though there is in this data, again if you look at here, the variability factor is 120%, right? 120% and skewness is 0.73 and this is medium skewed. It's medium skewed and as well as the variability is very high. And if you look at the pattern, there is trend and seasonality present over here, right? So this is the reason of getting this high variability of, and suppose we say medium skewness is because of the presence. Could be one of the reasons, right? I'm not saying this could be the only reason, but this could be one of the reasons. We have some visibility of the cause here, right? Some visibility of the cause. Yes, we have a trend pattern and a seasonal pattern in this data. That's the reason we have the high variability, or maybe this is medium skewed. Right? Now, like this, we have created some metrics over here, and then what we are saying that based upon this pattern, we are actually deciding a forecasting model, right? So the forecasting model in this case, if you look at here, this is no trend, no seasonality. If it is no trend and no seasonality, we are actually using a forecasting model of simple exponential smoothing. So simple exponential smoothing works on the data or on the sales history where we do not have any kind of patterns. And there are other forecasting models also which are available, like we can also apply ARIMA. Right, so ARIMA is a very very difficult model to apply on multiple data sets at one go. So what we are doing is that we are using a simple exponential smoothing. Of course, there is a chance we can also apply ARIMA here, because ARIMA also works very well if there is no trend and no seasonality. ARIMA works very well. But in Excel it is very difficult to implement for for thousands of items at one go. If we have few items, we can try with the ARIMA, but thousands of items together. If you look at here, let me show you. These are our products, right? We have thousands of products together, and these thousands of products, if you want to forecast at a one time, right, that is very difficult. In that case, it's very difficult. Excel is not the best tool to implement it. Okay. Now that's why I'm using another model, forecasting model, that's called SES. That's called simple exponential smoothing. If it is seasonal, I'm using moving average, right? So the moving average will actually smoothen the data. Suppose we have a seasonality in the data, so the moving average will do the smoothing process. So we don't need to employ a difficult model. Now if we have trend and seasonality, there are multiple forecasting models we can apply, but I am using a triple exponential smoothing. It's called TES, a triple exponential smoothing model here. Right? So like this, now based upon the patterns, we are actually employing the forecasting model. So if you suppose if I choose suppose say I'm choosing linear regression. Why I'm choosing linear regression? Because if you look at linear regression is only employed when there is a trend exists in it, not seasonality. The moment we see seasonality is not present, and pattern is trend available. The only pattern which is available is trend. Then I'm going to apply a linear regression model. So linear regression model here, if you look at linear regression model, I'm using a formula called forecast.linear, right? The forecast.linear is the formula which I'm using here, and this is giving me a forecast. Okay, so like this, for where there is a trend present, only trend is present and there is no seasonality is present, we are going to use linear regression as the forecast. Okay, so now if I go to another model, and this is let's say moving average. In the moving average, you can see the opposite, right? We do not see any trend, we see only seasonality. So here we are using moving average model, moving average as a forecast. Now if I choose, I have already shown SES, right? SES is when we don't have neither trend is present nor seasonality is present. In that case, we are going to use the forecast as no trend and no seasonality. Now we are going to understand what is that. This is our forecast which we have calculated, and this is the forecasting error which we are calculating over here. And this forecasting error, this is called the absolute error, absolute percentage error. What we are calculating here is absolute percentage error. So wherever the denominator, if you see there is a blank cells are there, these blanks are the reason of getting these blank cells is that wherever we have a denominator, this denominator equal to 0, means the historical sales is 0. So we should not, we will get indefinite value, or means infinite value in that case. So we are not, we are not calculating them, because since the denominator historical sales is 0, if the historical sales is 0, we should not actually go for the calculation. That's the logic which we are using here. So like this, we are actually calculating our MAPE. That's called mean absolute percentage error. If you look at this, is coming 10%. The error is 10% here, right? It's 10%, 50%, 10, 20%, 30%. So wherever is our, we have an error more than 35%, right? We're going to rework on those forecasting models. We have going to detect there is any outliers are present. So since we have not gone with the outliers now, so we are going to go with the outliers also now. And wherever the outliers are present, we will remove. We'll try to replace those outliers with the average, after considering that whether those outliers are not going to repeat further. Right? They're going to occur once in a year or once in a in 2 years. So if that is the chances, then we are going to replace those outliers with some kind of value. Either we will choose median or 95th percentile, or maybe median or mean, or what we will choose, or some kind of value which will help us. So 10% is error. That's why we say it's a mild error, right? It's a 10% mild error. So the moment we go more than 35%, all is mild. Look at here 0.5. This 0.5, this is going to give us a high error. 0.3 mild. So now what we do, we need to do simulations, right? So we have to perform simulations over here. So for the simulation, what we are doing is that we are first creating a matrix here based upon the table which I have just shown you. So this is the matrix which we have shown. So now I have to decide is which how many are the MTOs, how many are the NTS. MTO means the make to order strategy, NTS means make to stock strategy. And also we are seeing over here is between highest. HS means high skewness, MS means mild skewness, NS means no skewness. Within this high skewness, what is the percentage of MTO and what is the percentage of MTS, right? So if you look at here right now, we have the mild error is around 87.15% and the high error is around 10.34%. So in this 10.3.4%, we see at least the MTS values. So it's 2.93, 2.72, and this is 2.72, right? 2.72, 2.6 is kind of 5.5, 5.5 plus 2.9, this comes around 8.4. So this almost is 8%. All these yellow, highlighted, cells. This comes under the make to stock strategy, and this is having very high error. So what we need to do is, we need to reduce the error of for these make to stock strategies items. So once we reduce this, we have to shift. We have to work on the forecasting process once again, and shift this high forecasting errors which is coming in the make to stock strategy towards the mild forecasting error. So we have to, at least we have to do some optimization over here. Right now, if we, make this around 5 to 4%, like the high forecasting error items, bring down from 10 to 10.3% to 5% or 4%, then this will be, very good for our forecasting process, right? We are going to move into a demand plan with very high level of forecasting, accuracy. So this is what the most important thing is, that I want to work on such MTS items, and I want to reduce the forecasting error for these MTS items. For make to order, right, we can apply a strategy where we can actually, put an inventory vigilance team and ask them to monitor the MTO items, provided the orders which we are getting from the customers are not very high volume or high value products, right? If the orders which we are getting under MTO, they belong to high volume or high value, then we need to put a very special vigilance on such items, so that, even if we put an MTO strategy on such kind of items, we should not lose the orders. So for that, we need to have a very strong vigilance on such kind of items. Also, we need to check the supply, right? The supply means if we have local suppliers, if we have suppliers which are not actually, having constraint on MOQs, if you have suppliers with whom we have a contracts, if you have suppliers, if we have for example one raw material, if we have multiple suppliers, if you have such kind of arrangements, then we can easily go with MTO. And in case of suppose if the suppliers are not available in plenty, the suppliers are not local, available nationally or internationally, right? If suppliers are having constraint on the MOQs, the suppliers are not ready with the contracts. In such cases, right, we need to think about our MTO strategy and plan something in advance, because supply risk is very high. And since the supply risk is very high, then we need to have to put the raw materials in the stock in the warehouse, right? So that is what I wanted to discuss on this session. And if you have any questions, right, you can connect with me on the number 897. Let me share my number: 8977 924 637. Or you can also email me at krishnaidu at mathanal.com. Right, so let's discuss this further, and if you have any training requirements or consulting requirements, you can connect with us on this number. Let me share the country code also. This is +91 +91 right? So you can connect me over here, and we can take it forward from there. Thank you guys for watching this video and liking this video. Please share, like and share, so that we send this video to as many people as possible, and so that they can get the benefit of all these sessions, and they can apply. They should be able to apply the forecasting technique which I have just shared with their data and reap benefits out of it. Okay. Good night, guys, from India here. Thank you very much for watching this video.